everyone. Welcome back to Fun on Weekdays podcast. In a minute, I am about to be joined by one of my best friends, Meghann Morrow, and we have a surprise for you. We just had so much fun talking, and there was so much to cover. We went ahead and made this into a two-part episode. Part one, you'll get to know Meghann a little bit more. Meghann and I both went to Kent State. We're both from Ohio, and she talks about moving to New York City and finishing her college degree online her junior year of college. She talks about living in New York City and how she was able to build a community there, but how she kind of knew that she was outgrowing New York City during the pandemic. She then moved to Austin about a year ago and talks a little bit about how she met her boyfriend here, how she got her feet on the ground here, and built a new life for herself in Texas. She now works in recruiting, and she also does Amazon storefront and UGC content on the side. So in part two, we're going to dive right into Amazon storefront and social content and all of that fun stuff. So stay tuned, part one and part two. Part two will be up a little bit later this week, and I hope y'all enjoy part one. 3, 2, 1, action. Welcome back to Fun on Weekdays podcast, you guys. I am joined by my friend Meghann, who is easily mistaken as Vanessa Hudgens today.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me on, Jenna. I feel like this has been a long time coming, but when she originally asked me to do this podcast, it was funny because I'm thinking okay, why am I going to be on this? What am I going to bring to the table? What do I even have to say? What are people going to listen to? And then she's like, what do you mean? Like, you've lived 6 lives since I've met you. We met back in 2019.
Yeah, 2019 when I was studying for a semester in New York City. Meghann was living in New York City full time. Meghann was a year older than me in school, so technically you had been a year out of college at that point, I believe.
Yeah, so when Jen and I met, she had been doing the Kent State fashion program in New York City, where I had done the New York City fashion program that August before, and decided last minute I was going to finish my degree online, stay in New York, and see where it took me. And I ended up finding a freelancing gig through Ralph Lauren, and ended up staying, met Jenna through the Kent State program. We ended up being friends. She had a interesting roommate situation, and we kind of were friends off the bat because we lived in similar neighborhoods in Manhattan. She had heard of me. I had heard of her. We were in different sororities, but knew of each other. Ended up becoming friends, and we kind of just hit it off from the bat. Like, everybody thought we were sisters.
Well, yeah.
A lot of times. And it was a lot of explaining, like, no, we're just friends. But
we look alike too, though. And the funny thing about me and Meghann is we look very similar, but we are always in opposite wavelengths with our hair. So when my hair is short, Meghan's hair is long. When my hair is long, Meghan's hair is short.
But the other funny thing about it is Jenna's always wearing color, and I am in leather and black and boots and combat boots and dark makeup and dark hair always. And Jenna and I have always just been on opposite pages. We look the same from the back, but you look at the front and you're like, no, their styles are just completely different. But yeah, but we've been friends for a while now, and Jenna was actually the first person to get me to move down to Austin, and I'll kind of go back on backtrack a little bit on that. And I had originally been in New York City for 3.5 years at this point. I was there through the entire pandemic. Found that it was not the same New York City that it had cracked out to be. I remember my first 2 years there. I loved it. Loved the hustle and bustle in the city. And then eventually, when the pandemic struck, I was living alone for a long time. And then originally decided that I was going to come visit Jenna for Labor Day.
Wait, when you were living in New York too, when I was there that semester, you were living with 2 guys.
Yes. So when I moved to New York City, I guess I'll start from the very beginning of when I moved.
Oh my gosh. It's almost like when we're going into the story, it's like, wait, shoot, do we start there or do we start? There's so many starting points because I feel like you truly have lived like 6 lives in the past. Yeah.
I mean, I can definitely start from when I first originally decided that I was going to move to New York City. I had done a summer internship with Michael Kors, and
oh my gosh, back to Michael Kors. So this is even before Bergdorf.
Yes.
So we're in college.
Yeah, so I decided after my junior year at Kent State that I was going to do the study away program for the summer in New York City through Kent State. Ended up interning for Michael Kors. It was a dream come through. I was on their global communications and PR team. Loved it. Ended up wanting to stay and intern with them for another semester, but I was like, okay, if I'm going to decide to stay in New York City, my parents had given me 3 weeks, I think, to figure it out. They're like, okay, in a matter of 3 weeks, you need to be able to find someone to take your lease in Kent. You also need to find someone to take your car from you and buy it off of you because we're not going to be paying for it. And I was like, okay, bet. I'm going to find someone to do all these things, move there. Ended up finding these two random guys from Florida on a Facebook roommate page for New York City. And let me tell you, they were a hoot and a half to live with. Jenna had actually met them a few times before, but they had both been Florida guys. True Florida, Boca Raton. I think one of them was a Pike at FSU and the other one went to UF, and
Classic.
It was brilliant. One of them worked in real estate, the other at PwC. Honestly, they were a hoot to live with, just always partying. They treated me like a little sister. Honestly, it was a really fun experience to be able to live with guys. I almost felt like Jess from New Girl a lot of the time. That's what I was
going to say. Except for you didn't have a romantic connection to either one of them.
No, not at all. It wasn't like that at all. It was very much a little sister situation. And I always say that I feel like I lucked out with them, especially if I was going to live with two guys in New York City my first year there. And I was ballsy. I mean, looking back at that now, I would never voluntarily live with men ever unless I was either one, like dating them
or getting a ring from
or
him.
getting a nice fat ring on my finger. And me at 20 years old was a lot ballsier than I am now. But I will say I wouldn't have done it any other way, just because I learned so much, one, from living with guys, what works, what doesn't. And two, it was a great experience to be able to branch out and meet people that I had never been around before. I'd always had the same friends throughout college and kept in touch with my high school friends. And I was always that one that just kept that core friend group and really helped me branch out. And I started going on Hinge dates. And
here we go.
And it's funny, I joke about it now that I used to call myself the Hinge queen. At least 1 or 2 dates a week, I was just always out and about meeting someone new. And even if it didn't even end up working out in a romantic way, I always ended up being friends with these guys. They always introduced me to their friends and their friends' friends. And that's kind of how I made my circle in New York City. So when Jenna ended up coming in to do the study away program, that I think winter semester, right?
Yeah.
That spring semester. That's kind of when we met. I introduced her to everyone that I was friends with. And at that point, everyone who graduated the year above me from Kent State a lot of them had moved to New York City, especially if you're going through the fashion program at Kent. A lot of people either moved to New York or California. Those were the two hubs. But yeah, when Jenna came, honestly, we had a great semester. We'd go out every weekend together.
Murray Hill.
Murray Hill. We both lived in Murray Hill, which, if you know New York City at all, it's the Brads and Chads of New York City. And that's where you want to be if you're freshly graduated or you're an intern in the city. It's probably one of the best spots that you could be.
What was that place called on the corner of the street that we used to go to in Murray Hill? And it was always so freaking packed.
The Gem Saloon.
The Gem Saloon.
The Gem Saloon.
Gem Saloon.
We always went there, one, because if we were there, we probably weren't buying any of our
Absolutely
drinks.
not.
We were not paying for any of those drinks. But other than that, it was just full. I mean, we were young and dumb and single. So
and hot. You forgot that.
And then, I mean, when Jenna decided, she went back to Kent that following semester, and I decided to stay in New York City. I was like, okay, if I'm going to make a life for myself here, I need to make it work. I ended up freelancing for Ralph Lauren and then got offered the full-time job even before graduation. And I had taken a semester, not even a semester. It was more so when I finished my online degree, the classes were in 8-week increments. So I had taken 8 weeks off of school, and I was like, okay, what's my next move? Ended up finishing my degree online through Colorado State in marketing, of all things. I started in journalism, then went to PR, finished in marketing. So really, I had been all across the board in the communications realm. Finally finished December 2019. Ended up getting a full-time job with Ralph Lauren, which was a dream come true. I worked there for 2.5 years. Mm-hmm. And then the struck. I mean, I was furloughed along with probably 45-50% of the company at that time. And it was rough. I mean, New York was my life. My whole life was there. My friends were there. I had built a life for myself. And I couldn't imagine myself at that point in my life living anywhere else. And when that all kind of came crashing down during the pandemic, I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do now? So I was laid off, or furloughed, I should say.
I remember this so
and I had
vividly.
reached out to Jenna because at this point, it was nearing your graduation in 2020, and you were figuring out, where am I going to go next? I know you had been looking at Austin for a while, and That's kind of when you made your TikTok video and that went viral and you got the job at TikTok. So I was like, okay, like maybe I should be thinking about what's next if I have to leave New York City. I think Jen and I kind of leaned on each other in that moment because she was still searching for a job and I was pretty close to probably losing my job. I was furloughed at that point and eventually did get laid off. I want to say that upcoming December, January.
I remember it was like quite a few months of like going
Back
from
and
the
forth.
summer into the fall time of you being like, I don't really know where I stand right now. And like a lot of people were getting laid off. It was just a lot of unknown, a lot of in the air, a lot of like just what ifs.
Yeah. And I think at that point in my life, not only in my professional life, but my personal life was just a whole lot of what ifs. I was just like, okay, do I love New York City as much as I thought I did? The city was a lot different coming back from the pandemic, even with people moving back and things opening up and the restrictions kind of lifting. New York City had a bit of a different feel. It didn't feel quite as safe. It didn't feel like the home that I had moved into 2.5 years prior. I was like, okay, I was craving something different. And if Jen and I, we get along and we kind of relate on the fact that we're always looking for what's next. Like there's always like, all right, well, I did this. I'm kind of bored. Like I need something to excite me and just motivate me to do something else. So I had eventually decided that I was going to visit you for Labor Day just to see another city. I'd never been to Texas in my life. Austin wasn't on my places to visit, let alone live in.
Meghann is such a city girl. Like when I think of New
Truly.
York City, I only think of Meghann. Like that is how much I know that this girl was obsessed with New York City. So when she came to visit me, I was like, I know she's gonna love it, but like odds she moves here are so slim. But I have to do everything in my power to convince her to move because at this time I had only been living in Austin for about 2.5, 3 months because I moved in mid-July and this was Labor Day, so beginning of September. And I was just like, I had just been kind of establishing myself in Austin. I just kind of had a friend group that I was bringing Meghann kind of into. And I was also still exploring Austin at the same time. So I think Meghann visiting at that time was the best thing that could have happened because I was still exploring Austin as if it was brand new to me as well, as if I was a visitor.
Yeah, it's so funny because when I originally decided, it was like on a whim. Jen and I hadn't seen each other in almost 2 years at that point. I mean, the entire pandemic happened. No one was traveling. No one was visiting each other. She had her last year of college. So it had been a while. And you're like, you know what? Let's be spontaneous. Like, I want to see a new city. I want to get out of New York. I'm really bored here. There's nothing to do, no one to see. Went to Austin. Ended up having the best weekend. Honestly, probably one of my favorite weekends that I've ever had here. And I've been here almost 2 years now.
We talk about this forever. Like COVID, Austin hits different.
It hits different. I mean, if you are an OG Austinite, which I'm not even.
We can't even say
Austinite.
that we are because we've literally been here for 2 years. The OG Austinites are gonna be like, "Fuck yeah."
No, they're gonna be like, literally, shut up. But when Bungalow was still here, is what I consider like OG Rainy Street, and you kind of had to sit at a table and order your drinks, and like no one could really move. You were only really within your circle of people, and to me, that is the best way to go out. I mean, you're not being pushed and shoved around by the people around you. You actually get to hear people talk, and we would sit there for like 6-7 hours at a time.
Honestly, in the moment, it was kind of like we all craved this pre-pandemic party club vibe, but we didn't realize once we got that back how much we would miss like the COVID atmosphere of bars because you come with a group of, let's say, 12 people and you're sitting there and you're all actually talking to each other because, well, number one, you can hear each other and you're getting way faster service. You're getting the drinks to your table, so you're not having to like wait in line and getting shoved and getting shit spilled on you. And we're sitting there, we're playing like games and we're actually interacting with each other. And I think during that time, even though we were going out, we actually were hanging out with our friends versus going out now. I feel as though it's so difficult unless you're going to a very chill setting. It's so difficult to actually talk and interact with your friends. And I just really, really miss that aspect because even in the moment, it didn't seem like it was that great. But now we're like, damn it, what I would be doing to be playing like the finger game, the finger shot game at Bungalow with like our group, our core solid group of friends. Those are just such core memories of, especially when I first moved here and especially when you decided like, oh, I could see Austin as my future home.
And even it was like literally the day after that I had gotten here. I think I got here on a Thursday night, the Thursday before Labor Day. And Jenna had asked me the very following day, we were on our way to get coffee, and she goes, so what do you think of Austin? And I was just like, I want to move. Like, I want to move. How are we going to make it happen? We need to make it happen. And this is even before I had been introduced to any of her friends down here. This is just me and her. We went out to drinks the night that I got here, and we had dinner, and that was it. And I was fully convinced then. But the very next day.
Where did we go?
We went to, what's the place right next door to your apartment?
Oh, Anthem?
No, it's the bar with like the swinging chairs.
Oh, Idle Hands.
We went to Idle Hands and listened to music.
Okay.
And I think we ordered pizza from one of the places on South Congress.
Oh, gotcha. Oh, yeah. Home Slice, great place. I love their white pizza. It's so good.
But I think just being in an atmosphere that wasn't just concrete and smelled like pee, to be completely honest, it was just a good change of pace for me. And that's what I really needed, something to open my eyes and see, like, there are other cities in the U.S. that are just as great as New York City, if not better, or just as great, and half the price to live there. So
at the time, at least.
At the time. That's probably not the case anymore. But the very next day, we had made plans to go to lunch with some people that we knew mutually from Ohio, or Jenna knew them because they had went to OU and we had went to Kent State, and they're pretty much like rival colleges in Ohio, if you know anything about.
Are they? I don't even know if we're like, when I think of Kent State, I don't really think of many rivals because we were not like the best at sports necessarily. I mean, we were good at baseball. Our gymnastics team is incredible. But like football wise, OU was kind of like an ally.
I guess that's the best way to describe it. A neighbor,
yeah,
a college neighbor. But I had,
they were like my guy friends that were here, and they were the first guy friends that I made because they were mutuals, and we went to lunch, and I was trying to set Meghann up with the one friend.
So wait, I kind of wanted to backtrack on this story. So me being the Hinge queen that I am.
Oh my God, I forgot.
I was on Hinge, and I naturally changed my location from New York to Austin just to kind of, I wanted to come home with a cowboy. I wanted to see what was out there.
So you come home with a Midwestern.
Yeah, I come out.
Transit.
Literally. But I had ended up matching with my now boyfriend's roommate at the time, and he honestly, he's a good-looking guy. He's honestly, we're the best of friends now. Ended up deciding that we were going to meet them for lunch at Rustic Tap downtown on West 6th Street. And I had every intention to like get to know this guy that was living with my now boyfriend at the time. And see if we could hit it off. And Jen was like, no, you absolutely will. Like, I totally see this happening.
So hyping it up.
We get to the lunch. And not that there was anything wrong with him, or, I mean, we're obviously great friends to this day. But Connor, my now boyfriend, had been sitting across from me, and we had made a mutual connection through someone I went to high school with and someone he went to college with. And I don't know what really sparked that conversation, but from that conversation on, I think we were both just kind of mesmerized by each other. And I feel like sometimes like he sees things a little bit differently. Like, I did kind of make him chase me a little bit that weekend.
Oh,
like he was.
Are you kidding me?
Was he throwing down his credit card, buying my drinks all weekend?
Yes.
Absolutely. And was I pretending like I didn't know what was happening? Absolutely. But I think when it came to the end of the weekend, I'm kind of reflecting on the people that I met, and
oh my God,
I don't know. I said something to you.
I remember this.
We were laying in bed the morning that I was going to leave Austin and catch my flight. And I was like, you know what? Like,
she's like, Connor's kind of cute.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like he might like me. I was like, oh my God, looking back at it, I'm
we
like
had to put two and two together.
The night at Concrete Cowboy. Mind you, all three of our guy friends are like pulling Meghann in different directions, all buying her drinks all night. Meghann is up on the table, like dancing away, and we're all having this great night. And in the morning, we're like, yeah, no shit, he likes you. But like in the moment, I guess we weren't maybe like paying attention to it because they were all obviously like in love with Meghann. I mean, look at her, she's gorgeous. And then we went to lunch. Do you remember? All of us went to, I think, Corner Bar. And
you made it awkward because you.
Oh, okay, I'm so sorry. I have a horrible time at like, if I know insider detail, I'm going to share the insider detail, and I'm going to Give you a little nudge.
It's a booth situation. There's probably like 6 of us at this lunch. Connor slides into the booth, and Jenna like was about to slide in next to him, and she was like, "Oh shoot, I forgot," and then, like looks at me, like,
that's not slide,
urging me to scooch in next to Connor, and like at this point, like nothing has happened, like no one knows anything, and I'm like, you just made me look like so uncool at that moment, but we had talked the whole lunch, and I think when I was getting ready to leave, I was getting ready to leave, and at this point, I didn't really know for sure like how he was feeling. Like I was like, I could probably never see this man again. Like I have no idea. And then he gives me a hug, and he goes, "I'm actually from." He had actually been from upstate New York. Funny enough, about an hour outside of New York City, which worked out in our favor. But he asked me, he gave me a hug. He said, "I'd love to take you for dinner when I come home for Thanksgiving. Would you be open to me coming into the city and us going on a date?" Like he kind of said it a lot more casual than I'm making it seem right now. But I was just like, did anyone else hear that? Like I'm looking around, I'm like, did anyone else hear this man just ask me on a date? And like I rode that high like the entire ride to the airport. I was sitting on the plane. Like, should I text him? Like,
she was texting me.
Should I send him a message and say, like, I had a fun weekend? Because at this point, I did have his number. Like, he had messaged me on Instagram, or I had messaged him just to have his number to meet up for lunch the following day. So we kept in contact, and I'm like, you know what? I might never see him again, but I'm going to send him a text, say, I had a really good time. Love to see you again. And from that moment, I'm not even kidding. It feels like it was out of a movie, but we never stopped talking. We were just like constantly in contact, whether we were FaceTiming or texting or sending each other memes. It was just like nothing had come so easy to me in a very long time. I mean, when you live in New York City and you're only dating New York City finance men that are like pushing 30 and they're not really trying to have a wife or a girlfriend, it's just really hard to date. Like, so you almost have to like take your losses and just have fun and see what happens. But nothing ever came of any relationships that I ever had in New York City, regardless of how many dates I went on. But I was like, you know what? I never thought of the idea of distance, but as soon as I got back from Austin and Connor and I had kept in touch, this was the very first time that I ever considered doing distance with someone and really trying to make it work. And I think 4 weeks later, I had decided to fly back to Austin just to visit him.
Yeah.
And me and you kind of like tried to coordinate it. I'm like, is he going to ask me to stay with him? Am I going to stay with you?
Well, because Connor and I lived like literally on opposite ends of the road. So Meghann being here, it was kind of like, okay, if she doesn't stay with him, like she can stay with me. Like we're all going to hang out for the weekend regardless. But all weekend we're like texting back and forth, kind of waiting for like well, how's it going? You know, like you've been spending so much time talking not together. Sometimes like maybe you build up the anticipation in your mind that like when you are together, maybe it's not exactly that. But then you guys ended up dating that weekend, right?
Yeah. So I had gotten there on a Thursday or Friday night, and I had only stayed for what was supposed to be a long weekend. I think it turned into almost a week that I stayed because I extended my trip. It went so well, which again was really ballsy on my end, like to really visit someone I hardly know, and it only really been FaceTiming at this point. But I got there, and I think we went on our very first date. We went to Kachina, ATX Kachina, downtown, and it went really well. And our friend Sarah at the time had still been living in Austin, and Jenna and Sarah came and met up with us after the date. And I obviously pulled them into the bathroom, like told them how it went, that I thought I was in love. Like Classic. I knew kind of very early on that I think things were going to work out. And we weren't dating at this point. But the very next night, he had taken me to ABBA downtown on South Congress, and he had been walking. And I felt his hands sweating when we were walking like down up and down South Congress. But I think, and he goes, okay, let's go down here. Or let's go walk over here. And the walk kind of turned into like this 25-minute. And he'll explain it differently. He hates when I explain it like this. But I think he was just working up the nerve to ask me to be his girlfriend. And I genuinely had not had someone ask me face to face to be their girlfriend in what seemed like probably 6 years at that point, because the last person who did that was like my high school boyfriend. And it felt like so genuine and something I had never experienced before. So I obviously it was an immediate yes. I was like, of course I want to be with you. I don't care really how far we are across the country. I kind of had a gut feeling that it was going to work no matter what, whether I was in New York, we would make it work. And we had talks and conversations about that prior to even being in a relationship. But it's so crazy how one life decision can really change everything. Because me visiting Austin for Labor Day was that one life decision that changed my entire life.
And it's so interesting too, because at the time, like you said, we hadn't really been talking like that frequently. It was one of those friends that like, it didn't really matter if we didn't talk for like 4 months. We were still friends regardless. And so the trip kind of was just like
let's catch up.
I just moved here. Yeah. Like, let's just catch up. And then it ended up becoming like this whole thing. And then Meghann ended up moving here. And so how long was it that y'all were dating before you moved to Austin?
So from there, I would frequently visit. And this is when flight prices were probably 60, 70 round trip, like peak COVID in 2020. And I'd probably visited 6 or 7 times in a row before I decided that I was officially going to move to Austin. But we were probably doing the long distance thing for about 7 months. And then that May of 2021, I was like, is when I actually decided that Ralph Lauren had actually laid me off that March, and they gave me a package to like kind of support me through the next couple of months of my life. And when that was kind of up, I was like, okay, what's next? I'll figure it out when I get there, but I might as well let my lease in New York City end, figure out what's next, go stay with Connor for a little bit, and see what happens, because I could find a job in Austin. I could change my entire career path and see what else is out there besides the fashion industry. I could find a job in fashion. I really didn't know what was next for me. It was more so like, I'm going to move to Austin for the summer and see where it takes me.
Yeah.
And it ended up being the best decision I could have made for myself in that moment, because a lot of other personal things were happening on the back end that were kind of pushing me out of New York City and kind of pushing me to move on to the next chapter of my life. So I think overall, I would never change the decision that I made to Austin, because I look at me almost 2 years later, I'm still here.
I am going to backtrack a little bit. So we know the story. Meghann was in college, and then she had the Michael Kors internship, and then you worked for Bergdorf in between.
Yeah, so I had like a short stint where I worked for Bergdorf Goodman as like a stylist coordinator, and there were certain stylists within the store that would style celebrities like Hillary Clinton.
Oh my God.
All these people of importance. And that was like a very short-term job for me. Honestly, that was really to like get me on my feet and help me find like that freelance gig at Ralph Lauren. Like just kind of find my footing in the city. Very grateful for the opportunity. It was such a cool opportunity to be able to work with stylists, but styling is never something that I felt myself going into.
Girl, I can't even get started on the styling aspect.
I mean, you're the best stylist I know out of them all.
Oh, I can't even talk about styling. All right, you guys may already know this, and if you listened to last week's episode or you are following along on TikTok, I just moved into a house. Connor and I are renting a house. We just moved in over the weekend, and things have been going really well. Honestly, the decorating is going way faster than the apartment. And I think part of that is because this time around, I'm really just owning my style. I have decided that I am not going to ask people for their opinions. I'm going to only listen to my own opinions, only create a space that I truly love, that I want to live in, that I feel good in, and just owning my style. So if you're like me and you're refreshing your space, or maybe you're moving, or you're going back to school, you're looking to refresh, Macy's has everything you need, whether it's furniture, bedding, pillows, dishware, literally anything and everything. And if you need some inspo, you can go over to Macys.com/own your style. And you can also check out my landing page on Macys.com/FOW. Happy moving and happy fall. So prior to that, Meghann and I both went to Kent State. She originally started in journalism and then went into marketing. So your junior year, when you were living in New York City for that fall semester, for the fall semester, how did you decide that you were going to stay in New York City? So like basically you're in New York City and you have this opportunity. It's like, do I follow my career goals and like my dreams with my job? Or do I go back to college and do I not go back to college? And then I think about all of the things that I'm missing in the experiences of college. Like, how did you make that decision?
So at the time, I like to think that I make a lot of irrational decisions in the moment. And I feel like that's where some of my best and greatest decisions have come out of me being almost irrational and making things like making decisions based on how I'm feeling in that very moment. Impulsive. Yeah, that's a better way to put it. And it was nice to be able to have the support of my parents like right off the bat, because I feel like that's a first step for everything. And they were like, okay, you have these 3 weeks to decide whether or not you're going to come back to Kent State. Or you have 3 weeks to decide whether you're not, and you're going to stay in New York City, find a lease, sell your car, give up your lease in Ohio. And I'm like, okay, these all sound like super difficult tasks that are definitely going to take longer than 3 weeks, but like, let's give it all we got and see what happens. And I had actually decided, I think a week later, I was like, okay, the only way to really truly make this work is that I take a little bit of time off of school. And at this point, it's not that I didn't value my college education, because honestly, it brought me a lot of the opportunities that I had. Like I probably would have never gotten that Michael Kors internship that kickstarted my life in New York City without Kent State. But a lot of the opportunities that I found for myself, I found through networking events and sending emails and reaching out to brands and going to fashion weeks and really creating these own opportunities for myself rather than relying on my college and waiting for them. And I think that's why Jen and I always kind of really resonated with each other, because we were always looking for the next best internship or the next best opportunity for ourselves to have the best career, basically. And I was very, very career driven at that point in my life. So when I came to New York City, I'm like, okay, I'm going to make the very, very best of this. And when I originally decided to fully take the step and stay in New York City, it had been an easy one. It wasn't something that I had to sit on for a long time. I knew that I wanted to live in the city long term. I honestly thought that I would find my husband and stay there forever. I never saw myself living in the suburbs of Ohio ever again. So it was a very easy decision to leave. I think what kept me there is the community that I built for myself, especially that first year. I had really leaned in on the people that I had met through the summer, and then also the people that I had graduated the year above me had already been living there. So I had a foundation of friends that were already there. And honestly, that makes your experience in New York so much different, because when you're going into a city where you don't know anyone and no one knows you, it's a lot harder to put yourself out there and make friends. But being that I was 21, I was single, I had a fresh new career, I was taking a little bit of a break from school, I had a lot of free time to go meet people and go do things and network and go on dates and just build a community for myself. And I think that's why I ended up loving New York City so much. Like like I said, I could never picture myself leaving at that point. And I had gotten the two girls that I was living with at the time, they had taken a break from living in New York City, ended up moving home with their parents for a little bit. While I was still in our apartment alone, probably for about 5 months, I was living alone in downtown Manhattan. And the only person I had after my entire community had left, basically, they had fled the city, was my ex at the time.
Oh, so, God. Ooh, we don't talk about him.
Oh, yeah. So the only person I really had to lean on was him, coincidentally. So for those 5 months, I really had to create my own schedule and create my own life alone and be alone and think about what's next for me. And I almost fell out of love with the idea of being in a city where it felt so big yet so lonely at the same time, because it wasn't the same city that I had originally moved to. Mm-hmm. All of my friends had left with probably lesser chances of returning than I had thought originally planned. So when my 2 roommates moved back, we decided to take on one more lease in the Lower East Side. And I never wanted to move to begin with. I didn't feel financially secure to move, so it was probably a dumb decision on my end. Like I said, I made a lot of impulsive decisions when I lived in New York City. And I think it kind of drove a wedge in between me loving the city and a little bit of resentment for just moving in general and really taking, I mean, to move in New York City, you're probably paying like upwards of like $6,000 to $10,000 for a move total.
What?
Especially if you're moving from
You're kidding.
all the way downtown, uptown.
Per person.
I think all together, but
That's wild.
on top of a lease and being 22 years old.
And being in an entry-level fashion job, you're probably making around, I don't know, like 40. I was going to say around 40 to 50K. That's pretty like entry level.
It's not sustainable
at
all. So I think a lot of it rode on my insecurities and just feeling unstable in my own life. So there was a little bit of resentment on my side and kind of dealing with that. But aside from that, I had built this community for myself in New York City that had left. And then the very few select girls that ended up coming back, I think over time built this bond that I think every girl has experienced this at one point or another, built this bond, especially when you live with three people. Sometimes two can become closer than the three. And you feel like you're on the outs of the friendship at some point. And
once you have that in your mind too, it's so easy to kind of fixate on that a little bit, and then to just notice every little thing that it might not be personal, but like to you, it is personal. And especially when you do have that like little bit of insecurity of feeling like you are left out, it can really, really easily like eat at you and just kind of really make you question a lot.
Yes. And that's exactly what it did. I don't think it was anything specific that they were doing to target me or make me feel excluded or make me feel like I wasn't their friend. And I don't think that was their intention either. I think over time, friends naturally just grow apart, especially as we grow older and our priorities change. And at this time, when I was nearing the end of my lease in New York City and deciding that I was going to move to Austin, I had been dating Connor and they had both been single at the time. And I think also priorities shift when you have a boyfriend, and there's nothing wrong with that, and getting older and realizing where you kind of want to spend your time and less going out, less partying, and more focusing on your goals and who you want to value your time with. And that's not always something like we agreed on, and that's okay. And I think it's important to note that sometimes when we get older, it's okay to grow apart from your friends in a natural way. And that's exactly what happened. And I think towards the end, there was no animosity on my end. It just kind of fizzled out.
Some friendships just aren't meant to last, but that doesn't mean that they weren't a good friend in the moment. And I feel like you can still appreciate them for who they were for you at a certain time, but that doesn't mean that you need to carry them with you into like the next chapter of your life if your friendship is no longer serving each other. And that can be sometimes way harder than any breakup.
I also think it's nothing that anyone did wrong. I obviously, no one is perfect. There are times where I wasn't the best friend, and I can admit to that. But there's also times where I know for sure that people were doing me wrong too, and never received that apology or recognition that like, oh, you hurt me, and this is why I feel this way. And when I finally did let those feelings out, and they just kind of didn't understand, or they just didn't want to see it from my perspective, it kind of makes you rethink, is like, are these the people that are going to be standing by my side in my wedding? Are these the people that I see being in my life long term? And if you feel like that's not the case, then I think that was such a pivotal year for me, because I realized the people that I was putting the most energy into and the most time into and felt my best and my happiest were in Austin. And that is where,
That gave me goosebumps.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And I had always been the girl, like even through high school, through college, and I always had a big group of girlfriends. And I always thought that quantity of my friends was so much more important than the quality. And as I get older, I realize that's literally not the case at all. I would much rather have 3 or 4 or 5 good girlfriends that I know are going to be by my side and understand that life happens. And even if we don't talk for a couple months at a time, or we didn't hang out, or our plans didn't work out, there's never going to be any bad blood. There's never going to be an argument that comes with that. It's just life. We're getting older. And I think that I found that in Austin. I had created such a tight circle of people here. And I realized with the quality of people that were here came quantity. And I think then when you fixate on, oh, the more friends I have, the more plans I have, the better my life's going to be. And you kind of let that feeling go, and you let the idea of having more friends means better quality of life go. Your life kind of changes.
That's a really good point. I think especially like right after college, especially moving to a new city, you really do fixate on like constantly being busy. And it is interesting that you said that, because I don't think I've ever really noticed that about myself, but it is so true. Like you do relate the quality of friends the quantity of friends as the quantity of plans that you have, which isn't necessarily true, because sometimes the quality of friends you have means you see them more, it's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I find that I am now hanging out with the same four people at a time, and I find that my memories are so much more fond, and I could genuinely see these people being in my life forever, whether it's distant once we all decide to either eventually leave Austin, or life changes, people get off, get married, and things change. But I think finally at 25, I can confidently say that I've found friends that are actually worth giving the amount of time that I was giving friends that weren't good for me, and they weren't good for my mental health, and they just weren't pushing me to be the best version I can. They weren't celebrating my wins with me, and they weren't comforting me in my losses. And I think that's always something important to remember too. And friendships may come and go, but the people that you're going to want in your life long term, whether you talk to them every 2 months or you talk to them every 2 days, are people that are going to do that. They're going to celebrate with you when things are going great, and they're going to be a shoulder to cry on when things aren't going great.
Speaking of losses, so when you got furloughed from Ralph Lauren, what was that kind of feeling? And I know like a lot of people right now, my sister included, a lot of people that I know have been going through like losing their jobs, or their jobs are laying off a lot of people, and we're approaching a recession. What is like your best advice for keeping your hope and like not getting down on yourself when things aren't going right with like your career, and maybe you're at this pivotal time where like you are going to lose your job, or you're looking for a new opportunity?
Yeah. I mean, that's tough, because in the moment, I think I can speak from experience that when I got that initial email that I was going to have a meeting with HR and my director at that time, I was like, oh, gosh, did I do something wrong? Am I getting fired? And you get on this call, and everybody's just kind of straight-faced at this moment. And I'm like, okay, there's multiple people on this call. There's multiple employees on this call. This can't be good news. And everyone's kind of dead silent on the call, listening to the names being listed off that are included in this company-wide layoff. And in that moment, it's like earth-shattering. It's like that's your livelihood. That is your stream of income, and the reason that you get to live in the city that you're in and the place that you call home. So initial shock, I would say, but a lot of tears on that call. I never thought that I'd literally sit there and bawl my eyes out on a corporate call, but it does happen. And I'm sure there's plenty of people going through it right now, and I totally get it. But after that, I think after a few days of reflection, you're okay. You kind of have a moment to sit and breathe and think, all right, how am I going to approach this? Am I going to move forward and really tackle this, look for a new job, or am I going to sit and think about what's next for me? Is this even something I see myself doing long term? I'm at a point in my life where I should think about what's next. Like, do I want to make more money? Do I want to do digital site merchandising and e-commerce forever? Do I want to try something new while I'm young? I mean, when you are young, you get to have all these different paths and different avenues and try different things out. So I think for me, I took advantage of it and said, okay, let me try something new. I can always come back to this if I decide that it was the best fit for me and this is actually what I want to do. But yeah, from there, I decided that I was actually going to try something new and go into recruiting out of all things. I clearly love to hear myself talk. So I'm like, why not talk at other people?
You just love sorority recruitment so much. You're like, let me just do it for a living.
Literally. But it was out of the blue. I had found a recruiting job that ended up going remote, which allowed me to move to Austin, thankfully. And I ended up.
So you did have the job before you moved to Austin then, right?
So I had actually gotten the job offer the week that I had moved to Austin, but I wasn't starting until the following month. So I had a full month of just like exploring my new city, enjoying Connor and like just going on random date nights, eating all the Tex-Mex that I possibly could, really taking in Austin. But when I had started my new job, I have always also been a person that, I mean, I've said this before, it's like a what's next. I need a new challenge. I always need to be excited about the work that I'm doing. And I'm always been a super creative person in that sense. So going into recruiting, even though at the time thinking it was best for me, was more so just a way to get my footing and also just make a living for myself in a new city and find out, even at 25, what I really want to do. And for me, I think it's important to also note that having a 9-to-5 doesn't necessarily mean that has to be your path or your passion. Sometimes it really can just be a job, because there are other things outside of our 9-to-5s that we feel passionately about that we could maybe eventually take into a career one day, or just use it as a way to cushion ourselves until we find something that we really actually want to do with our lives. And I think we kind of lose sight of that in especially our mid to late 20s, when we're kind of nearing and comparing ourselves to everyone around us and seeing what they're doing. So I don't know. I still I'm still figuring it out. I definitely don't have all the answers. I can't say that I'm overly passionate about my 9-to-5, but I can say my quality of life while I've been here this past year and a half in Austin has never been better. And it's truly because of the decisions I've made to leave Ralph Lauren and move to Austin and leave friendships behind and really just like give myself a chance to make mistakes and try new things.
All right, you guys, not to cut it short, but I hope you enjoyed this episode and getting to know Meghann a little bit more and understanding how she is just such a good friend. I'm obsessed with her. We love Meghann, and I hope you all will tune in for part 2 of this episode. She is going to be talking about her experience building an Amazon storefront as a micro influencer on TikTok. She has made so much freaking money from this, and she has so many good tips for anybody that wants to start out and is looking for additional revenue. Maybe you're not fulfilled by your 9-to-5. So stay tuned for that, and I'll talk to you guys, well, in a minute.